What's up, War Room? Welcome back to another weekly edition of Connor and myself answering all of your Discord questions, of which there's no shortage because every 12 hours there's a massive amounts of Jets news these days. Connor, how we doing? How we feeling? We ready to do some Discord Q&A? We got a good range of topics today.
We really do. Obviously, a lot going on in Jets world. What else is new? So I'm excited to catch up, is what I like to call it. I get to read them. I try to respond to the quick-hitting ones, but most of them are good conversation, and that's why we save them for here.
We love to say War Room fodder, pod fodder, and save them for different things to bat around here. So we got a bunch. So let's dive into it. So first one from Hudson Jet. Any chance JD pulled the trigger on Dalvin Cook, not because Zeke signed with New England, but because Zach Martin signed with Dallas? I'm not necessarily sure either of these moves were overly directly correlated to it. My guess is the Jets had their number out there for Cook. Cook saw Zeke go off the market, realized how deep it was starting to get into camp. Listen to Monday Coffee, where I said if the Jets didn't sign him this week, they'd probably move on. And he's like, you know what? I'll take the contract up to $8.6 million, which is pretty good. It's more money than I think we expected.
He did great.
He did better for himself than I think both of us thought. And I'm sure he looked around and was like, who else is giving me this amount of money? And I think that's what moved it more than anything. As much fun as we had talking about Zach Martin last week, that was like a long shot. And it seemed like from Salah's comments earlier this offseason, they kind of had no interest in Zeke for whatever reason. I mean, what do you think like spurred the action here to just get this done finally on a random Monday night?
I think, number one, Cook saw what Zeke got right and probably realized he had a pretty good offer there on the table that it's hard to imagine. I was off on this one. I remember saying in the Discord specifically, I was like, I think this is going to come in a lot lower than people are expecting. I thought the base would be, 4, I think I said. And I thought it would be loaded up with incentives that could be up to, 6 or 7 that were probably not going to be reachable. I thought the base would really hover a couple million below this. So he did well for himself on a 1-year deal. I think a couple things, right? We talked about this a little bit on Fantasy Football Happy Hour, just saying that Rodgers took the pay cut, right? And when you take the pay cut, a substantial pay cut, you're not just doing that to put the money back in Woody Johnson's pockets or get a nice PR move for a couple of days that everybody's like, wow, he took a pay cut. You're doing that, especially a guy like Rodgers, highly competitive here to win a Super Bowl. You take that, you say, I will do this. You are going to go get me more help. And Rodgers, we know, is a guy that he likes to dabble in personnel, right or wrong, right? And we'll all see how that works out. He knows Dalvin Cook pretty well from afar. How many times has he played the Vikings in his career? So Rodgers has a certain respect for players around the league. Cook, who was a free agent, fell into that regard. The Jets with their running back room, it didn't feel like the Jets were, the panic alarm was on the running back room. It just felt like it was uncertain. So, and every part of it was uncertain. It was, when will Breece be Breece this year, or is he going to need more time? Will Michael Carter get back to being the player that flashed his rookie year? Does Bam Knight have more to offer than your typical undrafted player? Is Abanikanda going to be ready as a 20-year-old out of camp? It's just uncertainty. You don't know. And Cook in free agency, say what you want about him right now, is a certain option. Like, we can certifiably sit here and say that Cook is just a little bit more sturdy for Rodgers. So I think this was a very out of character signing by Joe Douglas. But on the flip side, let's be real. That's not cap space that Joe Douglas manufactured, really. It's cap space Aaron Rodgers manufactured.
Found money. Go spend it.
Right. And they owed that to Rodgers to go get him a player that he wanted that is going to help the offense. Like, we can sit here and say whatever we want back and forth, but this will help the offense, help the quarterback. So I think Cook realized, hey, the clock's ticking. It's probably not going to get better than this. It's a place that he wants to be. No one's denying that. One of the places he was interested in. He probably had a really good visit. And the market really, it gets scary when you're sitting on the market too long. Remember what happened to Morgan Moses when he got cut late into the season? When he came to the Jets on that 1-year flyer deal, it's like Morgan Moses is a lot better of a player than this, but you're waiting on, unfortunately, really catastrophic injuries to happen where you're a necessity for a team, and that's not a guarantee in this league. And I think Cook clearly did pretty well. The Jets wanted him, And it's August, as we sit here, Joe, you and I record, August 15th. We're less than a month away from an actual NFL football game being played on Monday night against the Bills.
We'll talk about this more in the podcast, which we're going to record right after, but I find it very hard to complain about taking the found money from Rodgers and just adding another talented player to the offense for a team that has had struggled to score points for such a long period of time. Let's stick with a question that stays in the family of the multiple running back sets. From Revo Man, what combinations of running backs do you see having the most potential in 21 personnel in Martini Nate's system? And I'm going to also roll this into another question from Flip077. Is there a big difference in Hackett's scheme to LaFleur's scheme? And there's sort of a general question with that and how it's going to impact the offensive linemen. I think to the first point, one of the things I liked a lot the Jets did last year was when they would have the sets that had Breece and Carter on the field. That's when they got a couple big plays. It's when they got a touchdown against Pittsburgh. You can definitely do some really interesting things with Cook and Breece out there together. And even beyond that, we've seen Carter operate from that. Izzy adds a really unique element compared to those other two guys from a speed perspective. I would think from a system standpoint, there's certainly going to be differences from what LaFleur and Hackett did, but I am sure that Hackett will find ways with Rodgers to be creative in getting multiple halfbacks on the field with how deep the Jets' depth chart is at the position, even if they move off one of the guys, which will be interesting to see what happens. I think there could be a lot of creative ways to use both of these guys. And look, Rodgers, I think, again, part of why he advocated for this, he was coming from a situation in Green Bay the last couple of years where he had a real 1A and 1B situation with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. And the Packers did a good job of finding a way to use both of those guys in a meaningful way. So, I don't know, let's fast forward to after the bye week. How do you think the Jets could get creative in using Cook and Breece, or Breece and another back, or Cook and another back at the same time? And, schematically overall, as a tail to this question, what would you say is going to look the most different about Hackett's scheme compared to LaFleur's scheme?
Okay, so lots to unpack here, and it kind of goes back to, I dropped in the Discord the meme of it's like a golden retriever next to like a monster, and it's like it was me thinking like, how do you get them on the field together, and everyone else screaming about how this ruined them in fantasy football. And so when this signing happened, that was the first thing that came to mind for me is, okay, let's say there's a perfect world where they're both suited up and healthy for a game, and what can you do? So I went back to 2017 and watched some of the Jaguars' offense, what Hackett did then, because Green Bay is the layup example, right? You see how the usage of Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon and their different backs and all of that. But Jacksonville was more interesting to me because they had a guy there in Fournette who you knew was good for 1,000 yards and was going to get a featured role. But I wanted to see, that year Jacksonville had Fournette, Chris Ivory, TJ Yeldon, Corey Grant, and they had Tommy Bohannon play 16
Pro Bowler,
games.
Pro Bowler.
And people are probably laughing at this. Jacksonville in 2017 was one of the best teams at utilizing their running backs in all of football under Hackett. I mean, they got Blake Bortles to a fucking AFC title game. Okay,
they almost won that game too. Almost won.
And they should have won. They should have won that game. So he did do a couple interesting things that I think correlate with Breece's skill set and Cook's skill set. And one thing I noticed that he did a couple of times was he would actually roll out three backs where they'd have the fullback on the field. And it seems like they like Nick Bawden and a fullback in this offense. It's just mind-blowing to think how many backs they might keep on this roster. So I'm not ready to...
6 running back depth chart.
It's insanity when you have talented pass catchers that you need to keep. So I'm not ready to dive in headfirst with that, but just something that I saw him do. He'd have the fullback and the running back in the backfield, and he'd actually have another running back motioned out or already out wide, and he would run a fake reverse to that player and then have the other actual running back in the backfield slip out to catch the ball. And they scored a touchdown off doing this. Chris Ivory, ironically. I think when watching this, and sure, it's 2017 and it's 2023 and things are different and all of that, but I'm not saying the Jets are going to copy that because Hackett's done that before, but it at least showed me he wants talented players on the field, and he will run heavy sets, and he will utilize running backs in the pass game. I mean, you got to realize that 2017 Jags team, this kind of blew my mind. Fournette had 36 catches on 48 targets. Chris Ivory had 21 catches on 28 targets. TJ Yeldon had 30 catches on 41 targets. And then Grant and Bohannon combined for 9 catches on 15 targets. That's a lot of passes to running backs. So I look at this a couple different ways, right? Izzy, I don't think, is going to factor in the pass game this year. Carter, we'll see what happens. He could, but he is really small, where you wonder if they like him in pass pro, but he's an effective pass catcher. Bam, okay, we'll see. But we know Cook and Brees can be big factors in the pass game. So if you put them on the field together and you kind of open up this offense that can be really heavy and run at you, but also throw it short to both running backs, and then also stretch the field with Garrett Wilson and we'll say McCole Hardman or Lazard as a tight to the formation blocker, that's a lot to throw at you.
A lot of talented offensive players all of a sudden.
This is what I'm
list.
saying.
Look at that list.
Right? So watching that, I got really excited. I got really, really excited. And I'm not saying Hackett's going to, dust off the archives of 2017, but I will be irrationally excited if he does. And with the talent he has, why wouldn't you?
What's ironic, I forgot Ivory had that stint with the Jaguars, and very randomly, must just be fate, my recording Badlands Twitter picture today was a Chris Ivory touchdown celebration.
Nice.
So fate right there. Next question, a little bit more of a fun one from JWP. What jersey, if any, will you wear when the Jets play in a Super Bowl this year? Now, I want to preface this, and I've always promised this to myself. If the Jets make it to a Super Bowl, I will attend the game. I will be there. I'll be in Vegas.
Yeah, there's no price limit, right?
There's no price limit. I'll be there. I'll be taking off work for the entire week before and after. Whatever it takes, I will be there. I'm actually lucky enough where I've been to a Super Bowl previously. Sadly, I was at the Rams-Patriots Super Bowl in Atlanta. A real riveting game to be at as a Jets fan. But had good seats thanks to a friend who works for the league. So I will find a way to get back there. How that works from a coverage perspective, I don't know, because I could be so emotionally broken if they lost, I won't be able to do it, and I could be so drunk and happy if they win. I don't know if I'd be able to do it.
Right.
I'll have to come.
Us yelling.
Yeah, I'll come track. If you're doing any media for like NBC, I'll come drag you off the set, and we'll find a way to get the pod done. Now, I would, if I were to wear a jersey, which honestly I probably wouldn't. I'd probably be wearing a ton of Badlands gear shamelessly and looking for other people who recognize us from the pod. But if I were to wear a jersey, I would probably be wearing my Curtis Martin Jets jersey with my grandpa's 1980s jacket over it. Now, I'm getting my kids the Sauce Gardner and Garrett Wilson throwback jerseys this year.
That's awesome.
If they have them in use size. I haven't really done the search yet, but I've decided already those are the ones they're getting because they'll be like durable and they're going to look very cool wearing them, even if they don't appreciate it yet. Maybe when I buy them, I end up buying one myself, but probably not. I'd probably be in the Curtis Martin jersey, 80s Jets jacket, sunglasses, very drunk, very loud, hugging everybody, and praying to God that the Jets could upset the Eagles as 11-point underdogs and win the Super Bowl in Vegas and maybe never coming back. So we'll see.
Man, there's a lot of questions for me that I have. One, I don't know if I would be working for SMY. Like, we've never even entertained.
That's true. It's a fair part. I forgot about SMY.
We don't know. We've never entertained it. I mean, the Jets have not made the playoffs since 2010. So I don't even think, like, this is a conversation hopefully we're having this year. I'm assuming we'll do playoff coverage, but Super Bowl is wildly different. So that's number one thing I'd have to find out. Two, I'm assuming I'll be at Radio Row during the week, like at the Super Bowl for NBC for the Fantasy Football Happy Hour show that we do. I know Barry went last year. So if it was, let's put it like this, and this is realistic. Say I'm working all week there, and I did that for Bleacher Report before, and then I just flew home. I didn't go to the game. If I'm working there all week, but not working game day, I am right there with you. No matter the cost, I'm going to the Super Bowl to watch the Jets in the Super Bowl. Now, I will say this. That's a really tough event live. The closest thing I've ever been to, and it's different because it's not one game and it's all decided. I went to a World Series game when the Mets played the Royals in 2015, And the counter was the game Conforto hit 2 home runs and they blew it near the end of the game. There's nothing more heartbreaking in your sports life than going home after that loss. But you're right, Joe. The counter side of it is if they win, it's one of the greatest moments of your entire life. So I'm with you. I'd be there. I think. There's a weird balance where I also wonder, like, should I watch it with my family? But but I think if I was already there for work, which I typically would be, we would go to the game.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, would you want to like bring your dad out and have him go to the game with you? Would I want to like go out with my like uncle and cousins and my dad, who I watched so many Jet games with? Like in 2009, we were of the mindset that we were going to find a way to go. And until it's actually here, and it's hard to say exactly how you would handle it. Again, the closest comparison I have was going to Jets-Jaguars in 98. I was very young. I was 11. So I thought it was going to be a regular occurrence and was sadly mistaken. So I can't even wrap my head around. I mean, Super Bowl, again, from the one time I went, I was lucky enough to have a very unique experience because I got to like go through all like the NFL like functions and had like very cool seats. Like it was a whole different kind of a thing. But that event is like unlike anything I've ever been to in my life, and I can't imagine the Jets being tied into it. Let's get to week 1 with everyone healthy first. Like Rodgers got
I was going to say.
Rodgers got like kicked in the calf today, and I almost had a heart attack. So let's just get to week 1.
It is fun to dream about. I know. I got off set, and I just was reading like nobody could find AVT. Rodgers is limping. They haven't completed 7 passes in a row. And then I like scaled back. I'm like, AVT I thought was on WFAN this morning. Rodgers never came out of practice. Guess what? The defense is pretty good. They also win reps too.
Yes.
What I said last week, and I know it's a little bit, it can come off as being a jerk, but training camp has become so fucking overrated. I'm already over it.
End it. We already had our fun preseason performance. Get us to our watch party so we can hang out with everyone. Then just take me right to week 1. Take me to Monday night in week 1. That's all I need. All right, last question. Then we're going to jump over to the pod, which will hit Wednesday a.m. War Room fam. A lot more people coming into War Room now since we closed down the Badlands basic feed. So it's great that people catching on, getting in the Discord, which has just been awesome. My favorite part of anything that we've added to the Patreon in the past couple years, maybe ever. Last question from Drew Day Rocks. What's your Mount Rushmore of Jets summer signings? Now, I was thinking about this a little bit because Douglas has been like randomly like kind of active and aggressive here, right?
They love this.
You got the Khalil signing, the Morgan Moses signing, the Dwayne Brown signing, and now the Dalvin Cook signing. Those are the 4 recent ones that popped in my head. Now, I know there's been other ones, so I was trying to like claw my brain back to like other like very late moves that they made. And these were not really summer signings, but they were summer transactions. So they traded for Jamal Adams. They got Bradley McDougald back, who was their week 1 safety.
Best one. Mount Rushmore, number 1.
Then they did the Sheldon Richardson trade late in the summer and got Jermaine Kearse, who was their number 1 receiver that year.
Right.
Kind of depressing, that 2017
Yeah, that one
team.
sucked.
2017 team. I feel like late, I'm trying to think, Ty Law was in season in 2008 when they added him. That was like for like their playoff push, and then of course it didn't work out. But that was in season. That wasn't in the summer right before, if I'm remembering it right. So look, I mean, of these, like some of them very like clearly worked out, and some of them didn't. Morgan Moses was a really nice one. I wish they still had that dude. That'd be great if we still had Morgan Moses.
Yep.
Khalil was an unmitigated disaster, but was probably the right thought at the time. Cook, TBD, but we're excited about it. Brown, I think, was good for what they got last year. I was really happy with what they got out of him. We loved ultimately. It's hard to remember too much about the Sheldon Richardson trade, but it made sense at the time. The Jamal Adams trade, of course, was a home run for the Jets. And then there's like, is there any other like ones that they made like late in the summer that was like really move the needle in either direction?
Not that I can really think of, honestly. I'm trying to go through it in my head right now because it's not that common, right? When did they sign Jason Taylor? Was that opening a free agency?
I think it was.
That'd be weird if it was.
I don't know if it was the opening of free agency, but I feel like it was like in the off season proper. It wasn't like
April
at the last
20th.
second. Yeah. Right around the draft then, yeah. That was weird when that happened. And what is Jason Taylor's most memorable play as a Jet? I have one very specific one in my head.
Didn't he do something big against the Steelers at some point?
He had a safety against the Steelers, and he was on the cover of the Daily News, I think, the Monday after.
Yes, exactly.
I don't want to spoil Buck the Trend because Dan and I recorded it over the weekend, and it's going to run Friday. But Dan stumped me with 2 questions. I got 3 of the 5 right, but the 2 he stumped me on were 2 of the hardest questions I've ever got on Jets history. And one of the ones I got wrong was loosely related to Jason Taylor and the Jets. So tune in for that on Friday.
It is one of those, like, you forget it ever happened.
Yeah.
But it's weird that you do because he played on one of the best Jets teams we've ever seen that came a couple plays from a Super Bowl appearance. And he wasn't a bust as a signing.
No.
He was just fine. He was completely adequate, right? It wasn't like he moved the needle at that age, but he wasn't bad. Because what was that, year 13 for him in the league? I mean, it's crazy that he was just, but you just kind of forget, probably because there was so many special moments with that team, and like he was just kind of an afterthought.
Yeah. It was
Mount Rushmore. Oof. I mean, trading Jamal Adams, can't you technically put ABT and Garrett Wilson on the Mount Rushmore because of the correlation?
I would happily put them on the Mount Rushmore. That was a classic. We've talked about this before. The late summer, trying to relax on the beach. It's the quiet time, and sure enough, something happens. Let me do one more quick scroll here before we go over to the pod, which will be not a lot more Dalvin Cook centric, but we're going to talk about a decent amount. I do want to read. I do want to also, actually, let's squeeze this one in.
Sure.
From M. McCland. I know everyone is saying Bam Knight is probably gone. I actually disagree with that.
I disagree too.
But with the addition of Cook, do you think there's a chance he could clear waivers and make it back to the practice squad? I would say no. I think
no.
Someone would grab him. Like there's enough there. And I know he didn't look great against Carolina, but that doesn't mean that he hasn't had a good summer. Like he's had a good summer by all accounts, and he was a little hot and cold last year, but he would not make it through. And again, I want to save it for the pod, but I don't think they're going to cut him. But I think someone would grab him without question. James Robinson got signed. He's the Giants' backup running back right now. He can't even run. That's
the thing. I think the reason why I'm a little bit more immersed in this than the average fan right now is because I'm just completely fantasy brain right now, where like we talk about the signings that go on around the league, and it'll just blow your mind. The guys that are third string running backs, in the league right now. And I look at Bam Knight, and it's not biased because I'm a Jets fan and cover the Jets. Like he plays special teams. He's a big body. He has pretty soft hands. He would be somebody that would be claimed. And the Jets staff freaking loves him. So guess what? They have a lot of friends in the league that would know that.
Yes. There's certain guys that we talk about the staff liking and the staff not liking, and I think we've been pretty consistent in that bearing out and how they handle these guys. And we're not saying these things repeatedly just because. We're saying them because we think they indicate certain roster things that are likely to happen, whether we personally agree with them or not. I always try to caveat that.